So I feel like nowadays you got to really think about what might your ads look like, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Wow, that's crazy. Like, what are my ads going to look like before even getting down to design the game?
Wordle.ai presents Game Dev and All Tech.
Right.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hey, George, and welcome everybody to another episode of Game Dev and All Tech. Sorry for the sort of different setup here. I'm over close to the Tokyo station today, so kind of in a different setup on my laptop. So apologies for the different setup and I guess my appearance in this my awesome gaming room is
Yeah,
a
you
little
look
bit
like
different.
a lead pro gamer.
One of these days. I mean, I guess I used to be good at FPS games until I got just too old, and then now I'm worthless at games in
Well,
general.
I'm sure you'll find your dad gaming phase at some point.
There you go. It's nice to meet you again, George. I know we haven't talked quite in a while. What's what's been happening? I heard you went to Gamescom recently.
Yeah, so over the past year, I've kind of been focusing on mobile marketing for games specifically, and so this is something I'm doing at App Agent, which is a mobile growth agency. And so this job has basically had me travel around the world pretty much to all the conferences. So over the last year, I've been to Pocket Gamer, GDC, Reboot, etc., and most recently Gamescom. Um, and I guess having this kind of view over the industry over a period of a year, well, a bit longer than that because I was also going to events before that. I guess I did kind of, I was happy to see some kind of optimism return to the games industry. The last 2 years have been kind of tough, especially the last quarter of last year. People were like being super careful with their budgets, not kind of planning too ambitious things until they understand how the financials are going and stuff like that. But this last Gamescom, I mean, first of all, it was a record-breaking attendance by their own numbers. Both like the B2B and the consumer areas were pretty packed. And it was like, funny enough for me, one of the first times I actually feel like I'm in a crowded place outside of Istanbul, because Istanbul always makes me feel like I'm in the maximum capacity of people. But yeah, it was fun. There was like a lot of booths, a lot of interesting big decorations. I remember I actually passed by the new Delta Force games booth because
Oh,
they
yeah.
had a trailer playing for that game. I used
Right,
to play
right.
those games like a lot when I was younger. I don't know about you, but
Delta Force. Yeah, I think I recall the series. Yeah.
yeah. So those are like set in the Middle East. I was passing by watching the new trailer, and their Arabic words were completely nonsensical, like detached letters, incorrectly placed and stuff. So I actually went up to their booth. I was with my Lebanese buddy also at the time, and we were like, "Guys, this is not right. Like, you got to fix this." So we actually gave them some feedback. That was fun.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of my business conversations, I do see more companies returning to focus on paid UA. And I think mainly what UA people have learned since maybe last year, I mean, maybe not learned, but have learned to focus more on, is to actually have a strategy, like a legit strategy where you have a step-by-step process that you're validating, you're setting some hypotheses, you're checking them, as opposed to before when it was more like just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I
Right.
feel like people are being a bit more methodical about it, probably because they're kind of like worried and concerned about the UA not being profitable these days. So people are kind of adapting, is what I can see.
I mean, that's good to hear. I mean, and then I guess obviously over the years, also tracking has dramatically changed, and the accuracy of tracking, so that way you can properly calculate things like LTV and whatnot. What are your kind of views on that, and how people are adapting that into their current strategies?
Yeah, so I mean, this has been something, for example, App Agent has been dealing with for a while after Apple changed the way tracking is done. Really, it comes down to relying more on like expertise in like statistical kind of analysis kind of expertise. So the guys at App Agent have been just trying to track stuff on a more basic level, just going back to Excel sheets, segregating tests, try not to test overlapping things at the same time so you can kind of figure out what is due to what. So there's a lot of going back to that, just like, basic Excel sheet kind of number crunching. And I actually did meet a company, I forget the name to be honest, but I did meet a company at Gamescom whose whole thing was like tracking in this environment where it's difficult to track. And it's all kind of like anonymized, and they're using different ways to do the tracking. So I guess, yeah, like people are relying more on just like statistical expertise, and there are new tools popping up to cater to these kinds of new environments where it's difficult to track.
And I guess for some of our viewers, just to kind of recap, like some of those technologies might be like what IP fingerprinting and other things of that nature to try and measure that person over the course of the time. And back in the good old days, we had a consistent ID that was associated with the user, and people couldn't opt out of an advertising ID. And even when we had advertising IDs, typically people wouldn't like reset them or whatever.
Yeah.
But now in the current world we live in, privacy has been cranked up a notch, and Apple iOS devices, you're using ad network, whatever sort of framework that they've set up.
The ATT framework.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Google Play, it's still pretty much like business as usual. Like nothing has changed there yet, has it?
Not yet, but I mean, there is news that they are planning to change things in a way that's kind of similar to what Apple did. So some people are nervous about that. But let's see. I mean, the effect I think of Apple's changes has been that people now typically test on Android just because it's like it's easier to kind of get the info you need there. So it is, if Google does go that direction, and kind of sounds like they might. Yeah, that's going to create some more complications in UA for sure.
Right.
But I guess that definitely makes all of these things that people are doing now to kind of adapt for iOS more important, right? So these new tools that are kind of more anonymized, more aggregated data, sometimes using AI to link things together, and also people just being very kind of methodical, careful, doing tests one by one. I think we're going to see more of that.
And then, how do you think that also affects the UA budgets as well, especially if we get Google switching back into, or not back, but into a more sort of privacy focused mode?
Yeah, I think basically UA people are going to have to be a bit more careful in terms of like trying to really do some informed tests before launching large scale campaigns. Something we rely heavily on, for example, at App Agent, is doing an entire month of diagnostic and analysis that kind of analyzes all of the marketing data that's available, but also plans out a roadmap of testing. right? So
Mhm.
we basically, whenever we engage with a partner, we do all of this analysis and auditing, and then we, like, for at least 3 months or longer, we're just testing, trying to figure out what are the levers that work in terms of the creatives, in terms of like how we're setting up the campaigns, all that stuff. So I think that's basically what reduces the risk, like putting together some assumptions, putting together a strategy, testing those assumptions, and kind of like crossing off what doesn't work, elaborating on what does work, and just tackling it from a kind of exploration first approach.
And as part of that process, would you then take those learnings and then apply that back to the game product itself and make, game improvements?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. So, I mean, App Agent is mostly focused on maintaining the growth, but they do also provide product recommendations, right? So based on
Mhm.
what they learn from the testing, from the campaigns, from all the UA testing, they do provide recommendations, mainly in terms of what affects the marketing funnel. So basically, the first-time user experience, making sure users aren't dropping there. And that does sometimes have to do with the consistency of the messaging. So like what you're showing in the ad versus what they're seeing on the store before they install versus what they actually see in those first few seconds in the app. So there is like, it's definitely a good idea to have consistency. And then the second thing would be in terms of the monetization. So like wherever you have a paywall or some kind of offering to monetize with, how that's placed, when that shows up. So those kinds of recommendations, yeah. And I
What
do
about
know that
those?
even
Go ahead.
before like working at App Agent, I do know that we used to do, like in the hyper casual days, right? We used to do all kinds of A/B tests and test all kind of
Yeah.
creatives just to see what to put back into the game in terms of a main hook. Yeah.
And I guess, what are your thoughts on, there's some of those like 4X games that are out there, and they have like those ads that, look like, it's a totally not the game that you play
Right.
inside the game. Like, I guess, but Hero Wars, they've got ads like this. Like
That's like
the,
the biggest culprit. Yeah.
yeah, like what's your thoughts on those type of uh, ads and that as a user acquisition strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, there's like the playable ones, and there's just the video ones, right? Um, Personally, I find the playable ones kind of interesting. I mean, it just gets you to interact with the character and the environment a bit. Sometimes it's not very accurate to the actual game. I feel like when it's like kind of tangentially accurate, it's kind of okay in my opinion. But sometimes,
Hmm.
indeed, it's like it has completely nothing to do with the game. And then
Right.
you have those video ads, like you mentioned, the Hero Wars, that are just like, I don't know what they're doing. They're just, it's a whole other operation on its own, the ad production there.
Yeah.
Uh, just really like tapping into people's weird psychological hooks and stuff in a way that's barely related to the game. Um, we try not to do too much of those, right?
Right.
And oftentimes, like especially if we're working with a client who cares about their brand, we just say this is not a good idea. Um, Now it depends on the company's business models, I guess, the game's business models, their priorities. But yeah, in general, we try to stay away from the fake ads as much as possible. And really, it's
Yeah.
because like long term, it's hurting the brand. So
Although, sometimes I wonder, because, at the same time I look at like, for Facebook instant games, you look at instant Intel, and, even though their MAU is kind of on the lower side,
mhm.
um, they're like top ranked for revenue. I'm like, man, they must be doing something right with that.
Yeah, I mean, like oftentimes the retention there is going to be really bad, right?
Yeah.
Like you have players coming in expecting something completely different, then they're just like in this experience where they're being onboarded through something that looks completely different and absolutely slower paced, and then yeah, so like the retention is typically bad. But I guess
Yeah.
these guys cast wide enough of a net that they can then make it work.
Right. I think especially with those games, they kind of rope the idea is like they kind of rope you in and hope that like some people stick around like in anticipation that you maybe get to that point where it's similar to the ad. You just kind of stay along, and then I guess eventually you get just kind of hooked on the game that they have based on
Right.
how it's designed, and then eventually you open up your wallet, and then yeah, you're in the deep end with those type of games, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot like sometimes when I'm walking around in some tourist neighborhood here in Istanbul, and the guy is like, yeah, come to our restaurant down the street. It has everything, all kinds of food. And you go there, it just has like 2 meals. So kind of gives me that feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess if their 2 meals are like good enough, they have good service, it could still keep me there.
Right. And then I guess what are some other trends that you're seeing in terms of games that are sort of breaking out or doing well these days on a global scale?
Yeah, I guess something that I have bittersweet feelings about and maybe makes me a bit concerned is that there's been a new focus on leveraging IPs. So big brands working with game development studios, and I see them. I see the idea. I see the merit. Like, it helps your marketing. It helps your UA because you can stick a big name onto the game, something people are familiar with. So it makes a lot of sense business wise. But at the same time, it's very concerning for me because I mean, I'm more interested in seeing cool indie games than seeing like something with a big corporate stamp on it, right?
Right.
Like Monopoly Go, for example. That game, I mean, first of all, credit to them. They took years to actually develop it. They changed it multiple times, but eventually they landed on a game that, in my opinion, is kind of pretty brain dead. But it has the Monopoly IP on it, and it's nice, and it has all these juicy effects and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And they spent, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing. Probably more now at this point, but it's just it's a strategy that the little guys can't really compete very well with, and that's a bit concerning for me.
So I guess the big question is nowadays for indie game developers or smaller developers, where are the sort of places where you think they can actually compete and get noticed?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about mobile games specifically, I think it's really hard, to be honest.
Mhm.
Maybe your best bet as an indie developer making mobile games is to try to make something really unique, but at the same time leverages maybe pop culture humor or something that's like close to memes, um, or something that's like over the top and like has the potential to be used in very engaging ads, right? So I think these days, and this is one of the reasons actually why I switched from working in games development and production for around 7 years or so to now focusing on games marketing, because
Mhm.
I feel like it's become marketing first. Like,
Right.
and it's always been to some point for some developers who tackled it that way, but it was never kind of a necessity. And now I
Yeah.
feel like it's totally a necessity, especially if you're targeting mobile. Um, so I feel like nowadays you got to really think about what might your ads look like, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Wow, that's crazy. Like, what are my ads gonna look like before even getting down to design the game? Jeez.
Pretty much. Pretty much, and I feel like even figuring out what your ads will look like, and maybe like testing some ads that just represent what the game might be like, will even actually affect the production and the features of the game itself.
I mean, that's a useful technique to try to validate your game business idea, I guess, before you actually get to work and code on it, right? Like you validate that through
For
some small ad testing here and there.
For sure, and maybe it's just me like reminiscing the good old days where you just made some fun games and they'd get decent traction back in the day, like
Yeah.
half a decade or more ago. But uh, but yeah, it really is this way. Like it's a necessity now. It's not just like the difference between someone who has like an okay launch against someone who has the best possible launch. No, it's not. It's like you either do this or you're not doing anything. You're just going to disappear in the vast ocean of the store if you don't actually think about these things now.
And then I guess as what do you think then if Google Play and the Apple App Store is this kind of like red ocean sort of battlefield, if you will? What do you think about web-based platforms like Facebook Instant Games, Crazy Games, and some of these other channels that are out there in the market?
Pokey, those guys, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they seem to be growing from what I see, just like from my conference attendance, every time kind of catching up with them. They seem to be growing. They seem to be doing well. I still don't think you can monetize that well on those platforms, at least compared to mobile. But for games that are already, for example, on mobile, it's a great extra revenue stream. But at the same time, I know like people have talked about this for a while, but 5G is finally becoming a thing that's more available. So that's one thing. So people can actually access quick games without installing them, and there's definitely a fatigue in terms of users wanting to install more apps these days.
Actually, I guess another big opportunity is with the web-based games, especially ones that have like a super app. Apple just recently changed the rules to allow these sort of HTML5 arcades to sort of exist. I think that is the exact language they're using, and allowing these super apps to actually monetize on iOS. So I think there's some it's the market is finally kind of catching up to the mobile native experience, and potentially as another way to link back to perhaps the mobile mobile apps, mobile native apps as well. So I'm also curious, George, especially with your experience in the UA field, what are your thoughts on a strategy? Because I know we've had playable ads, which are essentially mini HTML5 games. What's your thoughts are on releasing your game, say, on a web platform, and then being able to do a cross-channel play where you could resume your progress on say Google Play or Apple Store version of the game, and as a form of like a lower cost strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great strategy. And I actually met a company at Gamescom who told me they always work on their games like PC and console first, and then they port it to mobile, and everything is cross-play, everything is like shared progress, same user account. And they're like, they don't know why more people don't do it that way, because they kind of just funnel players from one version to the other. I think it's a great strategy. And I know, like, at my last job when I was working with Snappy guys, they were doing exactly that too, right? So supersnappy.com, it's still in beta, I think, at this point, but it's basically a platform where you can play all these kind of casual mini games with this cute avatar that you create that's used across the games. And then they're also working on releasing like the mobile app, the Super Snappy mobile app, where you can actually access all of these games as a hub. So
Right.
it makes sense. I used to see these kind of like arcade type things a few years back. They never seemed to really work out. Not sure why, to be honest. Maybe the tech just wasn't good enough. I mean, I know mobile H5 experience has not been amazing over the past few years. It's like gotten better now, to some limits even.
We're finally there. It's kind of finally hit the sort of promised land with the game engines finally kind of caught up, especially with I think Unity 6 is
Mhm.
actually fairly decent for web, and then Cocos, those guys have been doing well. Phaser, all these
Yeah,
game engines are starting to, I think, really
exactly. The
put on a
Unity
good.
6 news was particularly exciting for me. I haven't tested it out yet myself, but I'm planning to get back into Unity soon, and I'm excited to see
Nice.
what the mobile web builds are gonna feel like.
And are you still doing development work yourself, just kind of like as fun side projects, or?
It's been a while. It's been a couple of years, but I'm planning to get back into it with the news of Unity 6.
Oh, nice.
Now with all the AI tools available that can kind of guide me, and if I have some particular questions, I don't have to bash my head against the Unity manuals. I can just ask ChatGPT. So there's some nice things there.
What's your thoughts on like purely AI generated games? Do you
Oh
think
man.
that's going to be a thing, or are we all going to be replaced by robots?
I mean, I've started seeing these tech experiments of games fully created by AI. There was this AI web generation tool. I forget the name, but basically it's a tool where you go in, you can create a landing page or whatever. And now some people are actually giving it a prompt to basically come up with like a game jam style game, just some quick mechanics, some quick art. You just tell it what you need it to do, you tell it the logic, and it just generates it. And it's kind of crazy. So just the idea that you can now go to a game jam, give a few prompts to an AI, and you have your prototype. That's kind of crazy. I don't think we're gonna be replacing game developers, but maybe it is true that we might start needing less game developers on a team who are more specialized in using specific AI tools and making sure that what AI tools generate is valid, is optimized, is stuff like that. I don't see an AI just coming up with an enjoyable game all on its own without having some really weird stuff in there or completely unmanageable spaghetti code or stuff like that. So I think it's just going to be more like, I think of it the way like surgeons, they're now getting these robots that are used for surgery, right? So you kind of control the robot instead of putting your hands in the human being directly. So
Right.
I feel like it's going to be something like that. You're still going to need the human being to have that creative vision, to keep the big picture in mind in terms of how things are being coded and how the architecture of the entire project is, so that it's maintainable. You can work on DLCs and expansions later without hating yourself because the code is unmanageable. So I think you definitely need humans to keep things in order. Yeah.
I think it's just I can't remember who said it was like it's not that maybe it was Jensen of NVIDIA fame who said it, is that it's not that AI is going to replace people's jobs. It's that the people who know how to use AI are going to be replacing the jobs of people who don't, essentially.
100%. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Anything else exciting that you're looking forward to for the rest of the year? Date of recording, it's middle of September here, so
I'm looking forward to some of the PC and console releases. I play mostly on PC, so I have my Steam Deck. Been
nice.
enjoying. Yeah, I've been enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 with my girlfriend over the last couple months. So I like those kind of rich offline games. And starting to see some really interesting projects. Like at Gamescom, I saw obviously there's that big game, the Wukong game, right, with the monkey.
Oh yeah. Everyone's talking about that.
Yeah, I saw the other day a video about like how they hooked up some cats with some sensors and they just recorded their movements to generate some animations out of. So that was pretty wild. So
They just put
that's
sensors on cats.
yeah, it's like motion capture sensors on cats, and then they just recorded a bunch of mocap stuff, and then they still needed an AI to kind of like process it, clean it up, and then generate animations based on that. So first of all, that was amazing to see cats in mocap suits, but
Wow.
second, it was like interesting to hear about how they're using AI to basically create animations now. They give it some inspirational material and they generate stuff. So yeah, that's interesting. I saw also a game about like a mech warrior, what looked like a mechs MOBA game. That looked pretty fun.
Yeah. Was it Mecha Break or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Mecha Break.
Yeah.
It looked fun. They had some people playing live on stage and all that. And I've always been a fan of games like Zone of the Enders and stuff like that. I don't know how it's gonna feel like in a MOBA, but definitely something I'm excited to try.
Right.
But otherwise, I think I'm generally excited to see what the best applications or the most interesting applications of AI are going to be in terms of games production. At the last GDC, I did see some people who are creating NPCs that can kind of talk back to you. So it's kind of like having ChatGPT built into the NPCs in a game. And they can have like contextual information. So like if you're in this section of the game, they comment just on relevant stuff. Like if you ask it, what do I do next? It tells you like, go look for the map in this room or something, So that's interesting. But I'm more interested in seeing how the big tools like Unity, Unreal, and these kind of tools, how they're going to integrate AI features into the game engine. Is it going to get to the point where I can just tell the game engine, I want to create a system for managing enemies that have this type of behavior, and I just kind of talk to it, then it generates some templates for me that I can use? That would be very interesting, right? Like that would be kind of me learning how to make games again from scratch if it gets to that point, which is going to be very interesting.
Right.
And also just even generating assets straight in the game engine. Yeah, I'm going to be interested in seeing what I can do as a one-man show once these tools kind of catch up with all the AI stuff going on.
Awesome. And then I guess for new people who want to break into the industry, be it UA or actual game development, I know you've now been on both sides of the coin here. What would be your advice to those people getting into the games industry and getting started?
Yeah, so I guess I would say it used to be that the advice was just make a game. I don't think I still give that advice. I think nowadays it's more like it's more like try to figure out what might resonate with people and then try to come up with a minimum viable concept, test that out in the real world somehow, maybe if it's like with some random friends at least, or with like some kind of small scale marketing campaign at best. Try to figure out if your concept resonates or not first. And you might go through a bunch of these. You might go through a handful of these concepts that don't work. But once you find the one that does work, then okay, you can kind of settle down and start investing more into actually building out the game a bit more, then validating it with play tests and stuff like that. So I know that it's hard to kind of align our human brains and passions with that process. Like sometimes we just have an idea, we're excited for it, we just want to build it, put our time and sweat into it. But if you want it to be something that you release and get some attention, then that's probably not the best way to do it. You have to kind of test the waters, try to understand what are the visual and creative hooks that attract people, and then build a game around that. Because I mean, these days especially, like UA has also become like less of this thing where you need an expert at targeting who knows all the right ways to do the segmentation and the targeting and the keywords and all of that. And it's more of a black box thing. People just kind of throw the creatives there. You have the black box algorithm, and then you kind of wait for the results to see if it works out or not. So your levers have really become just the creatives, and so that basically means what your game is showing, like the art, what your game is trying to create as an experience, the vibe of it. All of that stuff is like doubly more important now. So yeah, I would basically tell them to approach it from this kind of validate your creative direction first approach.
Awesome. It's super insightful and helpful for everybody. George, I think we're kind of at time now, and it's also the time where you get to plug anything that you want, even yourself. The floor yours.
Sure, thanks, Will. So I've been in the games industry for over 8 years at this point, I guess, and I've worked in mobile games. I've been a founder of a mobile game studio. I've worked in project management for casual games mainly, and now I work at App Agent. And I guess my role in this whole industry is to kind of have a bit of a high-level view on all this stuff. And so like sometimes I help some people who are launching new games in terms of like consulting them on how to tackle that. So you can always find me on LinkedIn, just George Elhabr, Elhabr. If you want to reach out and ask me any questions about my experience, developing games, launching games, fundraising, building a business around games. And obviously, my main focus right now is App Agent. And App Agent is a strategic mobile growth agency. And we work with games like Merge Mansion, like Clash of Clans, like more recently, Marvel Puzzle Quest. And the focus is that we diagnose what could be the optimal way for them to continue to grow profitably. And then we execute whatever is needed there in terms of UA, ASO, and creatives. So if that sounds like something anyone watching needs, feel free to also reach out. I can tell you more about that.
Awesome. I've been your host, Will Bohn. Our guest today has been George, and this has also been brought to you by Wordle. You can find it at wordle.ai, which enables game developers to make their games reach the world all through one platform. Thank you so much, George, for your time, and yeah, see you around.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Will. And yeah, we'll talk soon.